Good morning, class. Welcome. The last chapter, the last series of lectures. I'll record a number of them for you. This chapter on senses is a great, fun chapter. Eye and ear anatomy, you've had the lab, so you've got a preview of all that, and I'll lecture on it as well here to make sure you got it. And today will be general overview, and we'll start out with things like, well, just your senses, and then we'll get to smell and taste, and then continue on to eye and ear, for vision and hearing, we really kind of focus on. All right, let's just begin here. All right. And you think about your senses, think about what you are without your senses. You would be a brain simply thinking to itself, if you lost your senses later in life, you would have your memories, etc., but you'd have no input. You would have no input on the world. I actually have a gift certificate over there for a place in Portland, Float Harder. You guys have heard about it, but it's a sensory deprivation experience where you float in the salt water. It's at a kind of, I think it's like body temperature, and there's no lights and can be no sound, or you can have music. There you got no clothes to feel on you. You're buoyant and no senses. Cool. Well, you still have your senses are also your internal body too. So your mind is constantly measuring your blood glucose levels, your oxygen levels, your blood pressure, all these things are being, your brain is taking those senses in, but it's minimizing the outside, stimuli. And you think that's how we experience the world, is through our senses, through our hearing, our vision, our touch, our smell, our taste. All these things are how we put input into our computer, our central nervous system, in order to have reactions and in order to live your life, to get that input, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, and how to make decisions. So first of all, yes, when you think about our senses, and we are primates, and we're mammals, and mammals, primary sense is smell. But us, we've gone away from that. Primates are visual. We have great eyes, we have color vision, so we're active during the day, because color vision you're going to see is useless at night. And our sense of smell is quite diminished, isn't it? You compare you to your dog and even cat, our smell is embarrassing how weak it is compared to your dog that can smell, can track a prisoners right through the swamp because it smells it. So we are primarily visual animals, us primates. Active during the day, we see color, very, very nice. Yeah. Now, if you're a bat, you fly around at night, and the normal bats that we have up here in North America that eat insects, vision is not that important because they're flying around at night, and they use sonar, something that we don't normally use, but they send out sound and it bounces back to these big ears, and they can determine what's going on in their environment. Just like in your boat, you have a depth, the depth gauge, or it's this sonar used for airplanes and such. That's what they use. And the moths, let's say that's their prey, they're flying around, and of course they've evolved. They have little hairs on their bodies that detect when a bat is sending out that high-pitched signal. And they know that they're being tracked by this predator, and they'll just dive, and they'll hope to avoid the bat. They'll just drop, right? And so there's this arms race back and forth between the predator and prey, where their senses become more attuned. And you can even do an experiment where you can release a bunch of moths in an auditorium, giving a talk. I want to show this, it'll be pretty impressive. And then you can click with the same frequency, some kind of sound device, that same frequency as the bat's sonar that they give off, and the moths will all drop. Imagine that, then they start flying up again. You can make them drop, like remote control. So pretty cool. But our senses are a window into our world. And honestly, I can tell you about my senses, but I can't get into your head. In lab, we have people that were colorblind, and how would you know you were colorblind unless someone told you, unless you figured out that your neighbor's like, well, you see red and green, right? What? So it's so interesting. Well, your senses are very individual. Your mind adapts to your particular senses. Yeah. But it is how we sense this world. Right now, I have reflective light coming off everything in this room into my retina. My occipital lobe is lighting up and my mind is perceiving what I'm seeing. I can hear this wine fridge over here buzzing. I can hear some things outside. It's reaching pressure waves or moving my eardrum. My temporal lobe is being stimulated. I feel this wool on my arm now that I think about it, right? Can feel the heart beating in my chest. I can't sense my blood pressure or my carbon dioxide levels. These are things that reach my mind that I don't. It doesn't reach a sensation. My mind is aware, but I'm not aware of it. Now, I studied timber rattlesnakes for years, radio tracked them, and love these guys out in Iowa. And they also have eyes, and so they see the world, not as sharply images that we see, but they also have nostrils, so they smell as we smell. And they also have this pit. They're pit vipers, and they sense heat. And so they see the world also in these, I can imagine it's like reds and blues, so how warm the environment is. And you can take these guys and you can tape over their eyes completely, and they can still hit a mouse in complete darkness because they see that heat signature, that mouse coming by, and they can accurately hit it. And then they live their lives, they give off chemicals off their belly, and they leave these trails that are invisible to us. But to other rattlesnakes, they use their tongue. They have another sense of smell where their tongue picks up odor molecules and puts them in the roof of their mouth. We have like remnants of that, but they do that, and they are following trails of other females and other individuals. And so you just got to think, when you look at your dog, your cat, your horse. I'm hunting deer, and I know that they have good vision for movement, but they can't see colors. Like we're bright orange, and so and their sense of smell is way higher. And so if you think about how other organisms and even other people see the world, or experience the world, everyone is individual. And as humans, we're pretty close. We have the same range of hearing. As you get older, you lose the high pitch, but we all have the same spectrum of colors that we see generally, right? But everyone's a little bit different. And especially when you start looking at, dogs and cats and other animals, they see the same world through a really different lens, of sensing the environment. All right. Let's get to some, set you up there, get to some A&P here. We look at the senses. General senses are your typical, your skin and even your joints and muscles and things like that we know how stretched they are. We know touch and pain and heat, things like that. So your general senses. We talk about special senses. These are things up in the head like vision and hearing and taste and smell. So these are your special senses. We call them special. And so all of them have in common is that they got some kind of receptor that is going to be stimulated by a certain kind of stimulus that turns into an action potential. And remember, action potentials are just action potentials. They are just a blip, all right? As I mentioned in class, I remember I said this. This blip would be someone pricks your finger, all right? Oh, do I smell chocolate chip cookies? Oh, it's like that. Am I touching velvet? Oh, that's interesting. Looks like that. They're all exactly the same. All right. Action potentials are not big, they're not small, but how do we know the difference between these very different sensory, these very different variables in our environment, it's sound and taste, is that what part of the brain is stimulated? And we're wired so that we know if we get a stimulus here, it's coming from our retina, from this region, and we know what's going on, what color it is, everything like that, maybe. So we have receptors out there that are going to be good sensors for temperature or oxygen levels or taste. All these things are going to be some kind of receptor that's going to cause depolarization of that neuron. And then action potential will go out through afferent or sensory nerves to our spinal cord and reach our brain. Or if it's in our head and neck, it'll go through cranial nerves and hit our brain. And I notice it says relatively specific, and it's true that that these vision rods and cones are really specific to light waves that come in, and different frequencies give you different colors too, right? But if you like you're hitting the head and you see stars kind of thing, it's because those neurons back there are being stimulated, and so it appears like you're seeing something, but it's not. It's through pressure. If you push on your eyeball too, it pushes on the retina, and these things will also be stimulated. See what I mean? And maybe you're tasting a hot pepper and you have the taste, but then you get the pain receptor too. And so, yeah, it's a little different. But we're looking at receptors are specific to various stimuli, but there can be some overlap there. If you push on a rod or cone, it will also be stimulated, but mostly light stimulates it. And so it can be a neuron itself, that is the receptor. So you can see here, dendrites get stimulated, it's a neuron, and then if it reaches that -55, that trigger, it's going to send a signal to your spinal cord brain. Or it can be some kind of structure, like we'll see in the ear, we have these hair cells, and the hairs will be bent with various sound vibrations, and then they will signal a nearby neuron, and that will, go through the cranial nerve 8, right, and go into your brain to tell you just heard something. So it can be either directly a nerve that's going to send the signal, it's going to be the receptor itself, or it can be some kind of specialized structure that tells the neuron to fire, and then it tells the brain. But everything, as you can see, all these different senses in our world come into our central nervous system. It could be just right to our brain, or most of our body comes to the spinal cord and then up to the brain. And then it's up to our minds to maybe have a reaction to it, maybe do something about it or not. And most of the stimuli reaching your brain, the vast majority is being ignored. You can't possibly focus on all the stimuli at one time. So you tend to focus on one thing and ignore the rest. And then, if a fire alarm goes off, then all your focus goes towards that, some big stimuli. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, so sensation is an impulse that your brain's being made aware of. But interestingly, a perception is how your mind interprets that. And so, we'll use an example later that when you bite into an apple, you get this sensation of chemicals from the apple go to your smell receptors, and the red color is going to hit the back of your brain until it's red. But you perceive that as because you use your memory and these variables to determine, oh, this is an apple because I've had that experience before, and it tastes good, it's good for me, I should eat it, all these things like that. So perception is how your mind gives a value or interprets that sensation. Sensation is purely your brain being lit up, letting your brain know that there's been a signal that reaches it. But without perception, it's just colors and etc. But sensation is just going to be in my visual cortex, just what the pattern is, but perception is when I make, oh, that's a face and that's danger. And this is watching a movie, what this all means. Indeed, I'm getting deep with our liberal arts education here. Yeah. All right. So to also to kind of expand on this, you look at these 4, A through D, and for me, it's Abraham Lincoln, Bugs Bunny, a brain, Eiffel Tower, right? So this is what my mind, the perception is of those because of my experience. I grew up in the United States, and I watched Bugs Bunny as a kid. I know my presidents generally, most of them, right? And I know Eiffel Tower. I've seen that. But if you think about it, with different experience, if you were you grew up as an Aborigine in Central Australia, and you didn't, you might not know that it's Abraham Lincoln. To you, that look like, oh, it's a black and white photo of an old guy, or you may have seen $5 bill, or that's that picture on the bill, but you don't know it's Abraham Lincoln. So it comes from our experience. We associate the sensation of that face with a perception of what it is, and we add a value and memories, and we know what it is. Yeah. So this all depends on your individual background, is how you perceive things. And there are people just amazing with that have damage so that they have problems with perception. And indeed, we'll talk about that, how you can see things, but then you're blocked. Like you could describe it, you could draw, you could write it down, but you can't associate like that face with a name or anything. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. So, all right, we could do a little experiment. Let's see if this works. If you guys have done that before, but it's kind of cool. Come back here. See if I can share this. No. You know what? I don't need to share this. This is you guys watch it. So I want you to click on that. And I'm not going to say anything more about it. I think I want to do it like that. Yeah. All right. I'll leave it at that. I could have. It's just a YouTube video, and I'll let you watch it, and it's pretty cool. Why isn't it letting me do this? All right, so to bring this, I don't want to give anything away, but the thing is, when you are listening to me, for instance, I listen to a lecture, and you're looking at the screen, but you know there's also other things reaching you. You're seeing, maybe you're looking at the screen, you're looking at my little picture, you're looking at things around you, maybe you're looking at your dog, even out of the corner of your eye. You know it's there, you know it's doing something, right? But it's all there. But can you be really aware of all these things simultaneously? And it turns out it's amazing how your mind filters out everything except what you are actually focusing on. And it's scary, amazing that same thing with the blind spot in your eye. It'll change your world when you realize how much you're ignoring when you focus on something. All right, do that little video and you will see what I mean. So yes, we have a filter so that we can't possibly be aware of everything at once. Our mind there's not enough bandwidth up there for us to do that. So we ignore things. Just like if you remember in your brain, that reticular formation is how wakeful you are. And that's where, as you sleep, you ignore all stimuli except super stimuli that would wake you up. You know what I mean? So your reticular formation kind of puts your mind in sleep mode, as in a computer. It can wake it up. And then even as you're awake and fully caffeinated, you're not aware of everything at once, right? And yeah, as I mentioned, these perceptual disorders, there are people that they know people that they've seen every day of their life, and yet they look at a face, and if they have a name tag, they can read it, or they learn to memorize things like how they smell, how tall they are, like things that are just like basic kind of mathematical things that instead of just us intuitively recognizing a face, and humans are really good at recognizing faces and assigning value to that. We grew up in groups, so we had to recognize your group members, and you had to be able to trust them, etc. It's good stuff. So in terms of perception, what reaches your eye, what reaches your brain is going to be a sensation. So if we look at this one, if you're reading up and down, I mean, that is a 13 in the middle all day long, right? But when you switch gears and you look at it horizontally, oh, that's a B, right? And so it really depends on the context, the environment. So it's the same things reaching your mind, that B or 13, but depends on the context. You completely perceive it or interpret it as being something different, right? You can see here, turns out if you see a seagull, not a rabbit, you're like 50 points higher IQ. I made that up completely. All right. It doesn't mean anything, but you can see how your mind goes back and forth depending on what you're doing. And you guys have seen this. It's either old lady or a young woman looking away. Yeah. So all these things, they reach your mind, and you can flip back and forth depending on the context, is how you perceive it. Oh, a couple of these I'll show you. This is wild. This, I promise you, is just a picture, just a JPEG. I would swear it's moving. I'm sure it is for you too, right? There's no movement. There's no video here. I see this came up my Facebook feed too. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I teach about this stuff. Oh my God, that is moving, isn't it? Well, this is an optical illusion. It's your mind is being fooled, and we don't know exactly why. But the idea here is when you look at the contrast between the blue and the black isn't as strong as between the blue and the white, and it reaches our mind at slightly different times. And then that's also how we perceive motion. And so this fools us into thinking there's motion that's not there. It's just a little window into how we some of the cheats that we use for motion, and how our minds are computers, and we always think of it as just being perfection, that we sense the world. We don't think, we're not introspective thinking, well, how do we perceive the world? And you can do these illusions and stuff, and it kind of breaks down kind of how your mind does it, these shortcuts. Great stuff. And we're delving into psychology and the brain. It's good stuff. This is my favorite. You see A and B? I know you're not going to believe me. A and B are the same shade. Yeah, I know. There's no way. B is lighter than A, right? All right, I took this image. I simply, I cut out the B and I simply moved it. Didn't change it at all. Those are the same shade. What happens is that our mind does these weird tricks, these calculations, and we know that things in shade are actually lighter than they are, that the shade makes things a little bit darker. So we adjust and make that be lighter because we think that's what should happen to things in the shade. Yep. I already told you about the blind spot, your mind making stuff up, right? Your mind is doing these calculations based on experience. Also, things in the distance, we assume they're smaller than things in the foreground. And so we do that calculation in our head. And you can YouTube some cool stuff where that you can fool your mind that way too. This makes my eyes hurt, but yeah. And this perspective I was talking about too. They're both the same length, but because it goes into the distance, our mind calculates, oh, things in the distance are actually bigger because they're farther away. And yeah. And it's something with faces upside down. I don't know if you've seen this, but humans, again, really adept at faces. We recognize people. It's so important in our evolution to understand our group and understand individuals, and to make sure that they're honest and stuff is a whole other thing. But you look at this, okay, looks like a kid upside down, right? But I just flipped it around. You can see, what's with this guy's face? So indeed, we're not used to seeing faces upside down. We got a real problem with that. We're used to seeing faces right side up. And here you see the Mona Lisa, something like a little different, right? I'll flip it around. Good God, look at her face, all right? So you can see, God, we just don't accurately look at a face upside down. This is just a joke here. This is nothing. But indeed, we have a large space in our brains for recognizing faces and for understanding individuals, so we can have these groups that allow us to survive. And yeah, I'll show you. Upside down, it's hard to recognize a face. Somebody may not even know this guy. Even like someone you do know for sure. I mean, obviously Barack Obama, right? But the other one, okay, you know it because you know who it is, right? But if you look at it, God, it's just, it doesn't, the one right side up just clicks. Like it's just a real instant, like so much you can put together with that person that you know from your memory. But we have problems with upside down faces. All right, yeah, big picture of me, I know, whatever. All right, so I taught a seminar class looking at biology, and we looked at attractiveness or beauty, like what it is. And one thing is symmetry. And you guys have, this is interesting. I'm sure a lot of you know about this, but the more symmetrical you are, even like if one foot is bigger than the other, it's been shown in fruit flies. If they have one wings different than the other, the females choose the one that has really symmetrical limbs and wings. It's so weird. Why? Who cares? If the right and left side are the same. But you can do this if you want to make symmetrical Jeff or yourself. I just cropped half the picture and just made a mirror image and put it on there. And now I am perfectly symmetrical. Of course, it means I have an extra tooth. It's shoulders a little weird, but that symmetry is found to be attractive in humans again and again and again. And the reason being, we think it means you have good genes and you're able to develop during development and have a good symmetry. If you're asymmetrical, it means that something about the genes in development is subpar. That's all I got for why we like symmetry, but it's definitely there. And so what makes a person attractive or not, And you're probably just saying to yourself, Parmalee, that is ridiculous because everyone has a different idea of beauty. Oh, and it depends on the culture. And it's all about TV, supermodels, we're used to that. No, there's a biology to it. And you find more attractive certain qualities. And it's universal among cultures. And it's been found, looking at women like men with a broader shoulder to waist ratio and a square jaw kind of thing, signals of masculinity and testosterone, things like that. And men prefer bigger hip to waist ratio for childbearing, and both prefer healthy. And if you look unhealthy, you're unattractive. Healthy means you have good genes, and that's what it's about. You're just thinking about. For men, it doesn't matter. Men are like, I want to mate with as many women as possible. It's just the way it is. That's their strategy to increase their genes. Women, because they when they're pregnant, they have 9 months and then they have years of taking care of it. It's a big investment. So they're pickier. They're the pickier sex in humans and most animals. Sometimes it's reversed because women put the more effort into it and they have less opportunities to mate. Whereas males, every mating is a possibility. I'll talk more about that in sexual reproduction in the next chapter. So with that being said, some of the things, that's where Facebook was invented, of course. You guys saw the movie about Facebook. They just put two pictures, who's hotter, and they just kind of come down to this hottest. And there's many things that go into it. One of them is symmetry, as I mentioned, how symmetrical you are. And then there's other ratios. When they look at people, it turns out that extremes in facial features are less attractive than if you put it together as a composite. It always seems to be more attractive than. So if you take individual faces and you meld them into an average, that comes out being more attractive often. And so, yeah. So it's pretty cool. And you can look at this again, even sadly, even you get little kids that they'll look at a picture and you'll say, who's the better teacher? And they'll pick the more attractive one based on these measures of how we think attractive is, even though it might have no bearing on how good a teacher they are. So yeah, it's sad, look at that, but it's not as individual as you think. You're driven by your biology and you're looking for good genes to leave your offspring. So sure, personality is important, all these things. And that is included in choosing a good mate as well, because especially in humans, it's who can beat up who is less important now than who can, I won't say make more money, but who can provide, a better environment for your offspring. I obviously digress, but good stuff. All right, so back to this, looking at how we sense the environment and how that goes to being a perception of knowing what that means. So I like this biting into the apple. This is what your book's example here. And so the sensory receptors, let's say you're bringing it up to bite it. Well, the chemicals, there's aldehydes and other chemicals that are volatile, will come off, and when you breathe, it's going to go to your nose. It's going to go to your olfactory nerve, into your limbic system, and into the area where you interpret smell. So sensory receptors will be olfactory receptors way up here looking for certain chemicals. It's going to go up the sensory nerve, that is your olfactory nerve, number 1 cranial nerve. It's going to reach that area of your brain that interprets smell. The sensation is going to be of those chemicals that are given off, a combination of chemicals that apples give off. And then your perception is going to be, oh, I recognize that from the first time you had an apple and someone's told you that's an apple. And so your whole life eating apples, you are going to associate that scent signature with an apple. And that's just one example of the smell. It's going to hit your taste buds. We'll talk about, it's just not as fine as the sense of smell. Taste is a little more of a blunt instrument. And then, the vision, the roundness, the redness, the tip of things that we have learned an apple looks like. And then even the crunching, we know, but that crunch could come from eating an onion or a potato. So, but with the other information from the smell, the taste, the sight, it's given us the perception. This is a damn apple, everything that I've learned tells me this is an apple. All right. This is like a multiple choice question, people. It just is. All right. These are the different types of receptors. And of course, chemoreceptors are going to receive chemicals. And this is smell and taste. And then inside of our body, we have chemoreceptors in our blood, for instance, that are going to get carbon dioxide levels and oxygen levels, glucose levels, sodium levels, potassium levels, right? So these are chemoreceptors too. But the ones we talk about as special senses are smell and taste. And these are chemicals will bind with the receptors and will tell our mind what we're sampling the environment with. So very important. As you eat, you breathe in smell, so important as you eat because it's right below your nose, right? And it will tell you if something is noxious and rotten versus it's sweet and it's delicious kind of thing. Give us information there. We'll talk about pain this lecture, they're called nociceptors or pain receptors. And these are pain, of course, and it can be caused by blunt force or chemicals like acids or high temperatures or low temperatures. Things can cause pain. Thermoreceptors, temperature. Mechanical receptors are changes in the environment, physical changes. So hearing is going to bend these hairs. They're going to do that. Touch receptors, things that cause change in mechanical forces. And of course, photoreceptors, light, photography, light. All right, and as you know, as we learned in the nervous system, you've got a neuron. And it's going to be stimulated. And if there's enough stimulation, it will fire action potential. And that will go to your spinal cord, your brain, and eventually action potential reaches areas where you are going to perceive that sensation. Indeed. All right, along with perception, projection is how you figure out where it came from. All right. And so let's say someone hit your hand with a hammer or hit it in the car door. You're going to have an extreme, there's a lot of pain. And then very quickly, your mind's going to go left hand in the car door. It's going to bring it back to where it came from. And as we'll see, it can be very specific. We talk about your lips, your fingertips, exactly where it came from. Or if it's like your lower back or the back of your arm, it's less specific, where that stimulus is coming from. All right, this has come from you guys see this show? Recognize where it's from? An A&E. Hoarders, he's really big. People that live with a lot of sometimes garbage and such. And what always gets to me is when the people come in, they first come in, they go, oh, it smells horrible. Like they got a million cats, smells like cat urine or like garbage or, rotten food. And then we ask the person, like, how do you stand there? Like, no, I don't smell it anymore. Yeah. So you really get used to it. And it's called adaptation. You become adapted to it. And it happens to all your senses except for pain, where you become used to it. And people with really bad body odor, very quickly you become used to it and you don't notice it, or too much perfume, etc. Oh, also, I hate, like I used to go to Dunkin', sit there. If you sit next to some old people with too much perfume, you can't really like enjoy, your coffee when it smells like perfume. Old people sometimes put on too much cologne or perfume, that their lack of smell gets dulled, and so they compensate. So that's kind of explains sometimes older people put on too much. And taste, you adapt very quickly too. If you have only so much money at the bar, not that you guys would do that, and we don't go to bars anymore, but we will again someday. But you want to buy the cheap beer later in the night. Maybe you guys can kind of realize some of this, because that first taste, you look at this is a beautiful graph here showing that the intensity of the flavor is highest that first time it gets to your taste buds. And over time you adapt to it. And you can change it if you rinse your palate, and you start fresh, or you move food to different parts of your tongue, you get that same intensity of flavor, but your taste buds will really quickly adapt to that. So yeah, so the intensity is greatest. That first bite, really enjoy that, savor it. You think I mean time, but I mean actually sound here. Like you definitely adapt to sound, right? You live in the city, someone comes to stay with you. How do you sleep with the subway and all the noises? And you learn to tune it out. So we tune out sounds very easily. And especially temperature, right? You put your foot in that hot tub, you're like, there's no way I'm getting my body in there, right? But then you notice if you take it slowly, then once you're in there, it's like, no, it's all right. So hot and cold, we definitely adapt within minutes, and then we don't notice it anymore. And of course, you walk into a movie theater, you're completely blind, especially from a bright day, but then your eyes adapt. Yeah. So you can see how we quickly our senses adapt to the environment. And what they do is, how do you do this? Well, so let's say, you first walk into the fish market in Portland. You smell like fish so strongly, it's just hitting you. And then once you're in there for a few minutes, then all of a sudden you don't notice it anymore. So you've learned to adapt. You've learned to filter out that information, because what good does your mind need to know every 2 seconds? Smells like fish, smells like fish, smells like fish. Got it. Your mind needs to know it smells like fish. And then once you're there, it's going to smell like fish, because you're in the fish market. And so it can do it either at the receptor that stops, just gets tired of telling your brain. It's called peripheral adaptation on the periphery, or a central adaptation where your mind just ignores the signal that keeps coming to it. So just know it can be peripherally or centrally is where you can be adapting and starting to ignore stimuli. And again, you know all these stimuli, right? A light, a temperature, a smell. Your mind learns to tune it out when it's no longer important. Unless it becomes a stronger stimuli. In the fish market, and they open up some rotten fish, it will hit you. You'll smell it even more. But normally, just the background, your body ignores it. All right, so general senses. Extero senses is the outside world, touch and pain from your skin, et cetera, right? If you're interoreceptor, you're thinking in your body. It's going to be, I got a stomach ache, or my heart hurts, or things that you don't even are aware of, like blood pressure and glucose levels. Those are inside your body, right? It can also be called visceral. When you hear visceral, think guts. So visceral receptor, interoreceptor. And then I think what proprioceptive means. That's the how stretched your muscles and joints are, proprioceptors. I talked about that with cranial nerves. All right, touch. Oh my God, so many sensations. If you remember, I showed you a picture of your cerebrum, and where different parts of your mind are dedicated to different parts of your body. And your lips, your face, your hands were huge. And then like your elbows and your ankles are really small. So we dedicate a lot of our touch receptors here to our fingers and our lips. It's where we interact with the environment a lot. And your free nerve endings are going to be everywhere. And if you cut those, you feel pain, or a sense of itching is similar to pain as well. Yeah. And then the two kinds of touch receptors, we'll talk about tactile and lamellated. Lamellated, I think like lamella or layers, looks like an onion, all these layers. And these are big. These are for, I did this with skin. This is for deep touch, pressure. And tactile are way up close to the epithelium. And that's for fine, a lot of those in sensitive areas of your body. So tactile corpuscles give you fine texture and delicate touch. And then these lamellated ones are big, and they give you pressure vibrations. Yeah, and so your skin, we did the skin, all the different functions of it. And one is a huge receptor for your senses, right? It's how we, when we touch things, we feel temperature and texture and pain, all these things through our skin. Yeah. All right, in terms of temperature, temperature receptors, it's interesting. I remember reading about this. We're not sure exactly like which ones are, I don't know, it's not obvious which ones are for temperature, but clearly we sense temperature. You put your hand in cold water, get in a hot shower, you feel temperature very nicely. And this is going to kind of blow your mind. Our warm receptors only really work between, I'll do Fahrenheit, 77 and 113. So you touch something that's 150 degrees, your warm receptors aren't going to work. It's just going to be pain. All right. And cold, you can see down to 50. Oh my God, we live in Maine, right? Yeah. So anything less than that, the cold receptors don't work. It's just felt as pain. Yeah. And so our warm and cold receptors also, you can notice, let's see, 77. Yeah, we notice you could have cold and warm receptors being stimulated, and your body just does the calculation. And so we're not really good at what temperature is this, touching thing, but we know warm and cold basically. And so we have these receptors, but anything outside those ranges, they're not useful, and it just becomes pain. Something searing hot, or you touch liquid nitrogen, super cold, but you don't feel cold, you feel pain. You might feel cold just before you feel pain, as that liquid nitrogen cools, but it's going to be so cold that you feel the pain. And speaking of pain, all right, I'll talk to you about pain. And this is a huge problem. People, I think your book talks about 20% of people live with pain. Chronic pain is a huge problem in how we deal with pain and how subjective pain is. And healthcare workers, it's just been found, they use it as the fifth vital sign. You ask the patient about pain, it's beginning to be adopted. That's the idea of how important this is. And you do realize that everyone's sense or threshold of pain is different. You can have one patient or athletic trainer, one athlete that has a very similar injury to another, and one's like, I can walk it off. The other's like, I need drugs, or not drugs, but I feel intense pain. So it is really, it's genetic, people's sensitivity to pain, and people vary quite a bit. And it's hard to really, you can't measure it like, oh, let me put the pain meter on you. Oh, you're a 7.6. None of that, is it, right? It's your mind that is sensing this pain. Yeah. So you have the little scale, how is the pain, what level, because there's no real objective measure of pain. It's all subjective. But pain is an important sense that your body uses to avoid injury. If you break your arm, there's pain, and it tells you your arm. If you're getting bit by a wolf, you feel pain in your left arm because you should try to get that wolf away from you, right? But then, there's other chronic pain we're going to see that doesn't seem to have any value. And then we have cancer can cause great pain and as well. So, so America deals with pain. America, the world, the people deal with pain, and it's a lot of research and a lot of money going towards drugs and therapies and things to alleviate pain, right? So I'm going to take a moment to talk about pain, a little more than the book does. And pain could be, you're stabbed, it could be kind of a cutting of the nerve, but it can be even a crushing, obviously, or chemicals can cause pain. And one thing, let's say you have a sprained ankle or something like that, and the damage will give off chemicals that fire these pain nerves that tell you, oh my God, my ankle hurts. And that is why heat sometimes will help alleviate pain, because those chemicals will build up and they become very concentrated. But if you increase blood flow, it's going to dilute those chemicals and dilute those pain chemicals. So that's the reason for that. And the adaptation of pain, not like smell. Like if you break your arm, it doesn't in a minute go away, the pain. It's going to continue. And it's survival. It's just letting you know there is a problem that could be life-threatening, that you need to know about it and address it. There's pain receptors everywhere. Your brain doesn't actually have pain receptors. The dura does, the meninges do. One idea of headaches caused by dehydration is that the less cerebrospinal fluid, the meninges will sag a little bit, but you've got pain there, pain receptors on your cornea, of course, and your skin everywhere, your teeth, but not your brain itself. And again, this is dated, but you guys know at UNE, we have a huge research push on pain. Jeff Ganter and Lele, people that study pain and fruit flies and such. And so it's a huge thing here at UNE is looking at pain research and or leaders in that. It's nice. All right, visceral pain is your guts. And turns out we have lots of pain receptors on our skin and in our bones, right? In our joints, things like that. Not as many in our internal organs because, if you have pain on your skin and your arm, you can address that, but pain in your spleen or something like that, and in your intestines, if you have it, what good is it for you to become aware of it? And I don't know if it's clear enough, but it's something that our viscera, our inside guts are not well adapted, lots of pain receptors that can tell us exactly where, like my left side of my liver hurts. Who cares? I mean, because you can't do anything about it, right? You can't like avoid that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's clear, but the pain is something that you can feel from your viscera, and it's weird. Sometimes not. You can, your intestines can be poked and prodded. You don't feel it, and other times, you feel your stomach stretched after a big meal. You can feel pain there, but you can't really localize it as well. You can't project where it comes from as well. And there's something called referred pain, where most famous example is you get a heart attack. You know that one of the signs is pain, not only kind of the heart region, but down your left arm. You're like, my left arm. There's nothing wrong with my left arm. That's my left arm. I looked at the computer, it looked backwards, but my left arm, there's nothing wrong with it. But it turns out that we think that the fibers coming from your heart show the pain. They kind of share fibers from your left arm region because your body's cheap. It's just kind of using the same pathways. And so referred pain means that you feel it elsewhere, but it's not really where it's coming from. So it's your heart that has the issue, but you feel it in your left arm. And other things, kidneys, you may feel it in your back region, things like that. So this is kind of a shortcut in your body where you use the same fibers for the viscera, which we don't care about as much, with parts of your skin, which you want to be able to project that pain to. And you don't have to memorize this whole picture here. You should know a heart attack goes down the left arm. You all should just know that. So looking at this, imagine this person gets a cut there in the thumb. Well, it's going to immediately there, you're going to be cutting nerve fibers. Chemicals are going to be released from the damaged tissue are going to stimulate pain nerves that are all over your skin there. And it's going to send the signal back maybe through your radial nerve there, your median nerve. Up, it's going to go up my arm into my spinal cord. And this is the brachial plexus. It's going to be up in the lower cervical, first thoracic region. And it's going to go in the spinal cord through the dorsal roots. That's where sensory comes in. And it's going to synapse with some nerves. They're going to take it up, the white matter, up into your brain. They go to your thalamus. It's going to switch it out. And eventually your cerebrum is going to project where that pain came from and also deliver that emotional response, start crying or realize, damn, I should have worn gloves. That kind of thing's all going to be rushing through your head. And then, of course, immediately you're going to withdraw from the pain and try to avoid further damage from whatever caused that pain, right? So that's what happens really quickly, right? So you have afferent or sensory nerve comes in, spinal cord, your cerebrum is made aware of it so it knows how to react to it and where it comes from, and then you can have that reaction. Yeah. All right, in terms of pain, maybe people have asked you, is it a sharp pain or more of a dull throbbing pain, right? Well, there's a difference here. You have two kinds of fibers, and acute pain is this sharp pain. And so we call them A fibers, A delta fibers, because acute pain. And then chronic pain fibers are C fibers. And acute pain fibers, A fibers, are myelinated. They're very fast. You know where the pain's coming from. So this is a lot of reflexes. Things are very quickly, the information gets to you that there's been damage there. Chronic pain goes much slower. So the fibers are not myelinated. So they're going slower. And often you feel both of these. You feel the sharp pain, then you feel kind of that throbbing pain that maybe lasts a little bit longer. Now, acute pain tells you when there's damage immediately. You stepped on that glass. Chronic pain is going to send this kind of dull throbbing pain saying that there's still an issue. And in some cases, chronic pain, people can live with it a lifetime. And there's sometimes not even a real cause behind it. We can't really pinpoint why people have chronic pain. So I'll talk about why that's a big issue. Chronic pain, CCC, you can see chronic, the C fibers, and then narcotics can block that pain. Sharp pain kind of just blows through it, but that's short lasting, that acute pain. Yeah, so taking a look at the difference here. And my wife, pharmacist, has been involved. She's given talks on chronic pain. It just gets migraines. And there's a whole society, where the chronic pain sufferers, they get together. And it's interesting how they lobby, because of course there's problems with opioid addiction. But then you don't want to go too far and take away those opioids that people with chronic pain need. And so there's this balance. And you rarely get people on the side of more opiates, but you don't want to push too far, that it's obviously a problem for some people, but then other people really need them. So anyways, people deal with chronic pain, and with it is a huge psychological toll. If you imagine you live with pain you cannot get rid of, you can see it make you suicidal, make you depressed, make you withdraw from society. And these people, chronic pain affects your life. So looking at it, you can see chronic pain can last, for years. Acute pain happens quickly. It's just letting your mind know I broke a bone, something like that. Yeah. And look at this, the pathology behind it. I mean, you got a broken bone or something. Sometimes we don't know what causes people with chronic pain. And what comes with it, you can see this depression, anxiety, other issues because of this unrelenting pain. It's a much slower. Look at biological value. Acute pain tells you it's important. It tells you I broke a finger. I need to set that finger. I need to do something, right? Chronic pain, what's the value of always being in pain? What can you do about that? Yeah. So I want you to realize that it can have profound social effects on people with chronic pain. And there's lots of people out there with chronic pain. And just real quickly, I just let you know what we can do about pain. It's not a pharmacy lecture or anything like that. It actually goes beyond pharmacy. I mean, you start with level 1. If people have pain, you can take NSAIDs, which are aspirin and ibuprofen, naproxen, things like that. Tylenol is not an NSAID. It's not. It does something else. But you pharmacy people, COX-2 inhibitors, all kinds of things. How do we deal with pain? We've looked at a lot of drugs to stop the firing of pain impulses. Right. But first of all, the basic, first level, we talk about people exercising. Exercising releases these endorphins, makes you feel good, and getting proper sleep really helps with pain too. And so that's your first level pain. You don't go with give me, oxys, right away. You try, let's try a better up the lifestyle. Let me take some Advil, things like that. But if the pain is more intense, you need to be more aggressive, and then you'll look at opioids. Vicodin, all kinds of things like that, right? And we got some other things too. You can do nerve blocks. I'll show you this in a moment. I got a picture, I think. And finally, advanced things. We're talking about actually freezing off the nerve or putting spinal cord implants. These are people with, advanced pain, chronic pain. But indeed, yes, exercise, nutrition, right, coping with stress, things like that. And NSAIDs, the aspirin, they can cause stomach upset and some issues like that. And acetaminophen is the most common Tylenol thing that we take, not an NSAID, but it's too much that can cause liver damage. So you don't want to OD on Tylenol either. But these things, over the counter would be your first level. But if not, you can go with opioids. They're stronger. They fit into receptors that will block the nerves from firing and telling your brain there's pain. And we make natural opioids, endorphins, endogenous morphine. And we discovered that morphine from this plant, and we've made, oxycodone, hydrocodone, fentanyl, it's got a chlorine on it, things like that. So we have opioids, and their problem, of course, there's this constipation, they have issues, but main thing is that the problem today is because if you take them not for pain, they're very addictive. And even for pain over time can become addictive. And then, yeah, you all know opioid addiction is, not a good thing. So, but they work for pain. And it's not like it's the devil, because people need opioids, but the potential to abuse them or to get trapped in this addiction are there. Nerve blocks, when I had a lower back pain, is a very common kind of chronic pain. They tried first, they put steroids and pain reliever, inject it right into the site back there, deep in the spine. It didn't really work. But that's one thing they can do. Yeah. And then they have things that will actually spinal cord stimulate. So instead of the pain getting there, I guess it feels like a buzz or something. It just keeps like, kind of a background. It's a little better than feeling pain. And they can, of course, freeze or burn off nerves. I talked about a rhizotomy, where you can cut the dorsal roots, and that stops the pain as well. And they can put drug pumps that you can actually control, giving yourself opioids right into your cerebrospinal fluid. Indeed. So in this pain continuum, you obviously start off taking an aspirin, and people with chronic pain, they can, we have more aggressive treatments. Yeah. So pain will come up, so you're aware of it. And then your cerebral cortex is going to judge, it's going to project where it comes from, your response to it, the intensity, all these things are things that your cerebrum is calculating, right? And you make natural enkephalins and endorphins, and serotonin makes you releasing enkephalins. But these are things that are natural painkillers. And so if you're under tremendous pain, these will be given off to try to inhibit some of those spinal cord nerves to lower the pain threshold naturally, right? And the drugs go in there and they just work a little more on that too. So your body makes these. And I would bring a cone shell if I saw you in person. I got these things. But you think about snails as being, oh, in my aquarium, they rasp the algae. But there's carnivorous snails, like these cone shells. They're beautiful too. I got some in my office. But they have a harpoon that comes out, and they will inject a fish with this toxin, this conotoxin. And you can see this video up here, if you will. That's pretty impressive. How the fish almost immediately becomes paralyzed, and the snail eats it. And just showing you that there are new drug therapies are often coming from the natural world, bioprospecting, looking out there. And so this conotoxin is a good example of a chemical that we are using from a snail to use for pain. And there's one from poison dart frogs, those beautiful, colorful frogs from the jungle. And it's a really potent, non-addictive pain reliever, but it kills people about 2% of the time. So again, if you don't work that kink out of it, it's not going to be very useful. And how pain relievers can work is they can block sodium channels or calcium channels, some mechanism that causes these neurons to fire with the pain. If you can stop them from firing, is what you need to do. So usually you're dealing with sodium or calcium channels, and shutting them off shuts off the pain. All right. It's a long lecture. I'm feeling it. We're almost there though. Remember, proprioception is going to be the position of your muscles and joints in space. And so I talked about some of the sensory nerves, like ocular motor, I talked about it being motor, but it's a little bit sensory because it has proprioception. So it's the position of your muscles and joints in space. And your joints have those big lamellated corpuscles, the big ones look like an onion to look at pressure. But there's two specialized ones, these muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs, that tell you the stretchiness. And they prevent, damage too, from overstretching a tendon and having it rip off. It will tell your mind, that's it, and then, stop that. Your lungs have stretch receptors. So once you inhale too much, it inhibits that. You can't breathe in and blow up your lungs. And so and these ones are actually modified muscle cells that have nerves around them. So that tells the stretch of the muscle. All right, and visceral senses. We can't really pinpoint, how difficult it is. I mean, gallbladder pain, generally is going to be in the upper right quadrant, right? Appendix pain in the lower right quadrant. But again, it can seem like it's kind of throbbing from that area. It's hard to pinpoint it. Where if someone sticks you with a pin, you know, oh my God, it's my pinky on the outside. You can really project right where it is. So visceral pain is more, it's usually dull. It's usually the C fibers, a little slower, dull pain, and hard to project where it's coming from. All right, nice little chart for you. All right, finally. Lastly, look at these two shapes. One of them we're going to call Booba and one Kiki. Which one do you want to call Kiki? Did you know that almost all of you out there thought it was this one? Why? I didn't tell you. Why? And it's called this cross connection of our senses. We take these sharp edges in visual terms, and we look at the auditory versus boo, boo, more rounded, it seems to us. And so this is called synesthesia, where we're going to combine our senses here. And it's really fascinating. We don't know, probably like 1 or 2% of people have this ability, if you will, where your senses are cross-connected, whereas most people they're not. Okay, what am I talking about? These are people out there that see a color and they feel a taste in their mouth. Like red is kind of feels, could be hot maybe, and blue maybe feels more icy, something like that. But it's a real thing. And people commonly hear music but see colors. And it's the weirdest things. You'll see shapes will give you, be like emotional. Yeah, like this pickle tastes like a rectangle. So this cross connection of your senses. Yeah, it's wild. And you know, if you have synesthesia, something like this, where the if the numbers really see colors to you, it makes them pop out like that. Whereas an old person would be hard to pick out the 2s from the 5s. And there's something called mirror touch synesthesia, where if someone touches them or gets pain, you feel it. If you can see it, you feel it at the same place. Oh, I know, really rare. We're not sure what's going on. Yeah. So synesthesia. If you want, you can YouTube. You can look at a simulation where it shows a person with this, where you hear music and they see colors. And again, this is something you don't know you have as a child because you think everyone has it, because it's just how you sense the world until you start talking and people start asking questions about why you see the world differently. Yeah, and it turns out a lot of musicians and very creative people have synesthesia. And John Mayer he sees colors when he hears different notes. And that's impossible for me to imagine, but you can see how it might be helpful as a musician to have visual feedback as well as auditory feedback. Yeah, so synesthesia, pretty cool. All right, so my next lectures, we'll get into the special senses. I'll give you general. We talked about touch, talked a lot about pain, temperature. Now we'll get to, the interesting ones, like our eyes and our ears and our taste and our smell. Really good stuff. All right, hope you guys hung in there. A lot of really cool stuff. This senses is how you experience your world, right? So good stuff. All right, done with this one.